Hey everyone, it's Richard Solomon, and bringing you another installment in the PhD Chronicles. I shouldn't say missing because I've not been missing, but I have been silent, at least on these platforms, for quite some time. I think my last PhD update would have been in the month of maybe late March, early May. But I wanted to bring you another installment. So in the last few months, we are now in June. This is June 9th, 2020. And of course, we are still dealing with the ravages of COVID-19 on planet Earth. And so that was a major distracting factor for quite some time in the first maybe February, March, etc. And so in the last few months, what I've been doing is I have been able to hit quite a bit of what's the word I'm looking for, rhythm, stride, as it relates to where I am right now with the PhD. I am in the area of, or in the component of the literature review, and I think I mentioned that before. The literature review is really to set the stage, the context for the work or the study that you propose to undertake. You must do it because you can't say I am doing original work if you don't know what has been done before. So it sets the stage for that. Additionally, what it does is that it locates your work within the work or the broader framework of the work or works that are being done. And the literature review tells you the state of the field. Yeah, so you stand on the shoulders of others in very much that way. And there were times in the last, and I'm nowhere near done. Well, I'm not done. I'm not saying near, maybe I am near, but I'm not done. But in the last few months, I would say from about mid to late March till now, I felt at times that I've bitten off more than I can chew. You know, when you do tertiary, or well, not so much tertiary, but certainly postgraduate work, they tell you, use the Goldilocks principle: not too hot, not too cold, not too big, not too small, etc. But there were times in there that I have felt, and sometimes I still feel like I've bitten off more than I can chew. So I thought I'd make a video to talk a little bit about that and to tell you where that is and how it's coming along. Now, let's talk about what I'm doing. So I'm studying, or I propose to examine the relationship between behavioral styles and work ethic within the labor force of Trinidad and Tobago. And on the surface, most people, when they hear it, they go, that would be an interesting study, because I'm looking at the entire labor force. Or I propose to look at the entire labor force. And I think it would be, in fact, an interesting study. But in order to do a literature review for something like that, there are so many components that one has to look at. So, for example, you have to look at personality, or behavioral styles and personality. Behavioral styles is a branch of personality study, and very often the literature uses the terms interchangeably. So you will see a study on behavioral styles, but referring to personality, because they do have some crossover. So you have to look at that. But if you're looking at personality, you have to look at, okay, what are personalities? Where did it come from? What's the history of that? So you have to examine that. You have to look at how do human personalities develop. We know the nature-nurture argument, which I've discovered should not even be an argument. One has to look at the genetic makeup of humans. You have to look at how genes get expression in the environment, which invalidates the nature-nurture argument. You have to look at the environment, which took me on a real a thrill ride over the last couple months. Because once I dove into the environment, I have to look at the environment of Trinidad and Tobago. I have to look at what created, or what were the contextual factors that set up for the workforce of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, if you're doing that, you must look at the major races within the population. I think Indians and Africans make up about 80+% of the population. That is Indians, Africans, and those people who identify as a mixture between those two races. So you have to look at those people. How did they get here? what were the conditions under which they existed, the environmental conditions. So that leads you to indentureship, it leads you to slavery, or should I say slavery and indentureship, because one followed the other. Of course, you have to look at colonialism and the forces that shape that. And if you're looking at peoples who came, you also have to look at Chinese, you have to look at Europeans and Syrians as major groups that came to Trinidad and Tobago. So a lot of history, a lot of politics, because politics shape this nation, a lot of economics, the petrochemical sector in particular, labor, and the labor movement and how it got started, and the force that it has applied to the nation or helped in shaping the nation. So a lot to really consider in there as I looked at, and this was a personality, but you have to look at the context. So I spent many days and nights and mornings, and I usually do my PhD work in the morning when my brain is clearest. So typically from about 4:30 till, depending on what I'm doing in that day, it could go until 6, it could go until 10, and there have been days I've gone until afternoon, depends on the day. I don't have a set time schedule, but I tend to do this work in the morning because my brain is clearest. So personality, but that's only one construct. I also have to look at work ethic. And looking at work ethic, again, you have to look at the origins. So you have to look at Max Weber. You have to look at Calvinism. You have to look at the Protestant element that influenced work ethic, what was happening with the Catholic Church at the time. You have to look at work ethic also in terms of how it has been come to known in the modern era, and then of course work ethic in Trinidad and Tobago. And there isn't a whole lot written about work ethic that I can rely on. I did find a thesis by Dr. P. Thomas, I think it's a 2019 thesis, on work ethic, and she looked at work ethic in a comparison of work ethic across generations, but only within one organization. So you can't generalize, So there is very little, almost nothing written that I can rely on. So nothing that is academically rigorous that speaks to the work ethic of Trinidad and Tobago, or the population of Trinidad and Tobago. Now there's a lot written. If you go into the newspapers and so on, you will find a whole lot, but I shouldn't say a whole lot. There's quite a bit, but not that which you can easily and comfortably rely on. And that brings me to the point of the literature, because that term means different things to different people depending on what you're doing. So, we all went to secondary school and we know that term literature. But literature in this case is academic literature. It's very different. And the question is, what can you rely on? And so in my head, I have a sort of an academic literature pyramid. At the very base of that pyramid, or maybe just existing outside of the lower edge of the pyramid, are things like newspaper articles. So in a lot of cases, I will not rely on a newspaper article, because as you appreciate, anyone can put anything in the newspaper. And this is not a front against newspapers. News plays a part in our lives, but we know that you can't always rely on the news and how it comes forward. So I don't regularly rely on the news as it relates to my literature review. Sometimes I do, and let me explain. So there are cases where the writer will cite their sources, good reports, etc. And if that happens, then what I have done is I go to the source. So if you say you are citing a report, let's say from the World Bank, I'm going to go to the report from the World Bank, and I'm going to look at that report for myself, to see if I can rely on what you say. Now, in the case of work ethic, as I said, there isn't much done or studied that I was able to find academic literature for work ethic. So what I had to do was I had to go into newspapers. And there's a lot written in newspapers about work ethic in Trinidad and Tobago. As I said, not so much, but there's quite a bit that you can find, people's opinions and so on. So at the outside, sometimes just at the base of the pyramid, newspapers, maybe go up one level or somewhere close to that, and you'd find websites. You have to be very careful about websites, because as you know, anyone can create a website, put stuff on there, and not because it's online means that it's true. So you have to be very cautious. Careful and cautious got confused in my mind, in my mouth. So you have to be cautious about that. Let me get some water. About relying on websites. But there are some websites that you can rely on and you should rely on. So for example, this morning as I was writing, it occurred to me that I made some references to attitude, both for personality and for work ethic. But I don't think I defined attitude anywhere in the lit review. So I thought, okay, let's look for a definition. So I went to the American Psychological Association. I found a definition. I went to the European Psychological Federation of Associations. They did not easily have a definition of attitude that I could rely on or I could use. So I quoted from the American Psychological Association. So that's a case where I used a website. And there are cases like that. There are many websites that you will find good information. But what you're now looking at is not so much what the site is, but who are the publishers of the site. Are those people credible? Yeah, so that's one way of approaching it. So websites. Typically, I do not use Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a source of literature, academic literature. Now, having said that, let me just point a little trick that I found. Inadvertently, when you do a web search for something, and there are many ways to search, as you know, but if you do a Google search for something, many times you will find a Wikipedia article on it. Now, the people who put together Wikipedia articles are people like you and I, just people. They put together their articles, so they write whatever it is, and you can't easily rely on it because it's not peer-reviewed, which I'll talk about in a little while. However, the better articles will have their sources. So if you go down to the bottom of many articles on Wikipedia, you will find where the sources or where did they get that information. And if you read, let's say, maybe a line or a paragraph, at the end of that, very often there'll be a little number in parentheses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you click on that, it will take you down to the bottom, the references. If you are interested, look at the source. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the sources are good sources. So I don't rely on Wikipedia, but if the sources are solid, then I may rely on the sources themselves, not Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is not a search engine that I would use for academic research. However, sometimes people have done good work in terms of putting together the work, and the sources are good. So you will not find a reference to Wikipedia in my work, but the sources themselves, which is where you should go. All right? Let's go up the chain or the pyramid, as it were. So now I talked about websites. Books. Books are not at the top of my pyramid of academic literature. You might say, well, why? Books are where we learn. Sure, they are, but anyone can write a book. Yes, you can write a book and publish it yourself, or you can write a book and have a publisher put it together. And books, while they can be very useful, you have to also be careful. So, of course, you cite books. Of course, you read books. You read chapters in books. This is another thing. You don't have to read the entire book. You may read a chapter in the book. So I've done that. You may read book reviews. So I've done that. There are a lot of books on Google. You get Google Books. So you can go into that and you can find components of work that you can use. So yes, you can if you have textbooks. So this is important now. Academic textbooks. You can rely on those. And those will very often cite their sources. Inadvertently, they will say, this is where we got our information from. And you can now reference that. Reference the book itself, not the source, unless you've gone to the source and see what the source had to say. Right? So books are pretty high up. You can usually rely on them, but usually these are textbooks or other works. So for example, as I was looking at work ethic, I had to look at Protestant Work Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber. Now, that is a classic work that many sociologists, economists use, well known. It's an older work. I think it was written somewhere in I don't remember. But there are various ones that have been published over time. I have a copy that I was able to find online. So yes, you can use books. You can use your textbooks. Very often for theories, you will find them in books. books or frameworks that you are relying on or theories that you're relying on. So books. At the very top of the academic literature pyramid, you will find journal articles. And usually this is the holy grail of academic literature. And you might say, well, Richard, why are journal articles the holy grail? Well, journal articles are usually very rigorous. Of course, you have to find the ones that are real and solid. There are some predatory journals that we don't use, and there's a way that you spot them, right? But journal articles, why are they so important? They're usually written by other researchers who are experienced in their fields, and very important, they are peer-reviewed. So other researchers would have looked at the work of those researchers and writers and said, this is good work. They're peer-reviewed. So their peers, people at similar levels like them in that field, would have done a review of that work. And there are many, thousands of journal articles. Now, the universities usually mostly provide you with access, some type of access to journal articles. So you can find them online. If you go to Google Scholar, you'll find some. If you go to ProQuest, for example, ProQuest usually has a nice database, not usually, it does, a nice database of academic works, theses and dissertations. Yeah, so those will usually lead you to a treasure trove of great journal articles, but your university will usually provide you. So for me, at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, there is an electronic library. I don't have to I have never physically gone into a library for this work, but there's an electronic library that connects you to the world, and then you can do your search, you put in your keywords, which is really critical. You have to be very specific about what you're looking for. So for example, if I'm looking at work ethic in Trinidad and Tobago, I'll put in work ethic, I'll put in Trinidad and Tobago. I may put work ethic, Trinidad and or Tobago as the searches, and then I'll get thousands and thousands of results usually. I'll narrow that down. So you always want to build on the most recent work. So I'm going to narrow that down to time. So I might say, okay, only give me journal articles. I can select journal articles because there'll be books in there, ebooks in there, newspaper articles, all kinds of stuff, periodicals. I'll say, give me journal articles from, let's say, 1980 to 2020. And if I want something really recent, I'll go, give me from 2015 to 2020. Yeah? So you can find that. Now, here's a problem, or a challenge if you want. Many times, the journal article is listed there, but it's not available. It's sometimes available. You'll get the full text of the actual article, but typically to get journal articles, you have to pay for them. So journals will sell subscriptions, and there are many of them. There are many ways to get around those. There are various sites that will actually give you access to journal articles for free. So there are ways to get around that. Lots of times, however, you will get the actual article. You get the full text right there. And an article can range. I mean, it depends on the article. It can be short. I have articles of 3 or 4 pages, and I have others of 20 pages. So it really depends on the article and what you're looking for. Typically, once I hit an article that I think I want to look at, given the title, so it would have corresponded to my keyword search, which is critical. And the articles also list keywords. Then I would read the abstract, which is usually about a paragraph that says, this is what this article is about. Now, if you read the abstract, it usually will tell you if this is something that you need to go into further. I have found an interesting way of doing it. I'll read the abstract, and if it looks interesting, I'll go to the conclusion, if there is one. If the conclusions are aligned to the type of information I'm looking for, yeah, so abstract aligned, conclusions aligned, then I will read the article. Yeah, I'll read the entire article and pull out the pieces. Or I will listen to the article. I do that a lot. So what I do, inadvertently, the articles will be in PDF format. I use an app, or I'm looking for my phone, but I'm doing this on my phone, right? I use an app called Speechify. It's a free app. I think there's a paid subscription as well for some additional functionality, but Speechify. Speechify, it's not a perfect app, but it's decent. It allows you to upload a PDF document onto